Then someone's voice broke the silence. Blood! On the dirt beside the fire pit lay a cloth stained deep red. Nearby, half buried in mud, was a small child's shoe. Jesus, another voice whispered. She was here, and she wasn't alone. Night eventually settled over St. Helena Medical Center. The daytime chaos had faded, replaced by soft voices and the quiet hum of machines. In the pediatric intensive care unit, the lights were low, monitors blinking gently. Max lay curled. On a thin blanket beside the bed, his body pressed close to the wall. His eyes stayed open, sharp and alert. Every sound, the beeping of the heart monitor, the footsteps of nurses in the hall, made his ears twitch. He hadn't moved from her side since they brought her in. The nurses had set down water and food, but Max barely touched either. Occasionally, he would lift his head to glance at the monitor, then rest it again on his paws as though guarding something precious. The girl, Sophie, had not stirred in hours. Her skin was pale, her breathing faint but steady under the oxygen mask. Her small, bruised hands rested near the edge of the bed. And then, just before dawn, something changed. It was small, a faint gasp. Then another Max's ears shot up, Sophie's eyelids, fluttered the nurse on duty half asleep. With a chart in her lap sat. "Up straight, doctor," she called out, already moving. But Max had already moved first. He stood slowly and stepped closer to the bed, his paws silent against the tile he rested, his chin gently on the mattress edge watching as Sophie's eyes blinked open, unfocused. At first then, slowly, clearly locking on him, her lips trembled. "Max," she whispered, barely a sound. Max let out a soft whine almost like a sigh of relief and leaned in, pressing his snout over her hand as gently as breath. The room filled with quiet tears. The doctor rushed in, but no one could move fast enough to miss what was happening. Our union that needed no words, no explanation. In that moment, everyone watching understood. Max hadn't just saved her, he'd stayed to bring her back. The morning light filtered. Softly through the blinds in, Sophie's hospital room machines beeped gently. Measuring life one heartbeat at a time, Max lay curled. Beneath her bed, still as stone, Buttle weighs. Watching across from her, Dr. Eliza Monroe sat with a warm notepad and a Kinder. Gaze, her voice was calm, shaped for trust. "Sophie," she said gently, "do you feel strong enough to tell me what happened?" Sophie nodded faintly, her fingers curled into Max's thick fur, grounding herself. "There was a man," she began. "His name was Alan. I think I remember seeing him before he used toe-bring tools to fix stuff at our neighbor's house. He always waved at me. He wasn't a stranger." Eliza kept her expression still listening one day. "Max and I were in the yard. He pulled up in his truck and said, 'Mom needed me to come with him, that there was an emergency.' I didn't think it was weird. He seemed calm." She paused, eyes distant. "But he didn't take me to where my mom was. He just kept driving hours. Maybe I don't remember sleeping when I woke up. We were in the woods. He said we were camping, that I'd be safer." There with him, at first he was quiet, like he was pretending everything was normal. But then something broke. He got angry, started talking to people who weren't. There he kept saying the world was dangerous, that I didn't need my mom any more, just him. When I asked to go home, he screamed, he hit me. Max barked and tried to stop him. He kicked Max. Then he don't remember much." Sophie's voice trailed into a whisper, her whole body stiffened under the blanket. Eliza saw the trembling in her hands, how her fingers clutched Max's fur like a lifeline, her eyes locked on a fixed point in space, wide, unblinking. A single tear threatened to fall, but didn't. Her face was frozen, a child's expression shaped by something far too adult, fear. "I thought I was going to die out there," she whispered. "I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. I just waited. I felt like no one would ever find me." She turned toward Max, pressing her face gently into his shoulder. "He didn't leave," she whispered, "even when I couldn't move, even when I passed out. He stayed. He brought me home." Dr. Monroe sat in silence deeply. Moved, this wasn't just a case of violence, it was a story of delusion, obsession, and a dog who refused to abandon the one who needed him most. The day after Sophie awoke, a different kind of energy stirred. Through St. Helena Medical Center, the story of the dog who saved a little girl had spread far beyond hospital walls. First through whispers among staff, then into the hands of detectives, and soon into headlines, Detective Ben Carter worked quickly with Sophie's testimony and the trail. Max handled them through his team, traced the abduction route hidden in the woods. They found more than just a makeshift camp. A nearby gas station's security footage confirmed the rest. Alan Price, 39, a former handyman in Sophie's neighborhood, was the man who had taken her 2 days later. They found him alone, pacing nervously outside a gas station 20 miles out and didn't resist arrest. Inside his backpack were a broken bracelet, a children's sketchbook, and unopened snacks, Sophie's things. "It wasn't like that," he muttered as the cuffs clicked shut. But by then no one cared what story he told. Back at the hospital, Sophie had been moved to a private recovery room, though. She was still weak. Her color had returned, and she was eating again. Max remained beside her, never leaving her side, not even for sleep. Then just before sunset, the elevator doors opened. Mara Whitfield, Sophie's mother, stepped into the pediatric wing with unsteady legs. Her hair was unkempt, her face hollow from sleepless nights. The moment she saw Sophie through the window, her body gave out. A nurse caught her before she fell. I thought she was gone," Mara whispered. "I thought I'd never see her again." Inside the room, Sophie's eyes lit up. She sat up slowly, breath caught in her chest. "Mom," she said barely above. A whisper. Mara rushed through the door and fell to her knees beside the bed. Her hands trembled as she reached for Sophie's face. "Oh my God, my baby," she wept. "My sweet girl, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have protected you." Tears streamed down Sophie's cheeks, but she smiled as she reached out, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. They held each other for what felt like forever, and then Max stood up. He took a single step forward. Mara looked at him through blurred vision. She reached out and placed her hand on his head, whispering through a sob, "You saved her. You brought her back to me." Max simply stood there, calm and still. No bark, no sound, just presence, loyalty, love. A few days later, Sophie was strong enough to walk again. Slow steps, at first holding her mother's hand, while Max stayed close, never more than a few inches from her side. Staff from every wing of the hospital stopped by to say goodbye. Some offered soft words, others gave quiet nods of respect. One nurse placed a red ribbon around Max's neck and whispered, "You're a real hero." I didn't wag his tail, he didn't need to. Outside, the morning air was warm, sunlight gently spilling across the hospital steps. Mara held Sophie close. As they exited the building, one hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, the other brushing against Max's back. They paused for a moment at the top of the steps. Sophie turned to Max, knelt down carefully, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You brought me home," she said, softly. Max leaned into her hug, quiet, and still. Mara watched them both, a tear slipping down her cheek, not from pain anymore, but from something closer to peace. Then the three of them, mother, daughter, and dog, walked forward together, out of the hospital, out of the darkness, and into the light. It began like so many other mornings at St. Helena Medical Center, the kind of morning where everything seemed to happen at once, where the air itself felt full and heavy with urgency. The hospital was awake long before the sun had fully risen. Phones rang without a single pause, shrill and impatient. The intercom crackled with code calls, voices cutting sharply through the noise. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mixed with the faint scent of strong coffee. Down the hall, nurses in crisp blue scrubs hurried past, pushing gurneys that squeaked faintly over polished floors. Doctors moved quickly, shouting instructions over the constant hum of movement. Paperwork shuffled, stretchers rattled, and somewhere in the distance, an infant wailed. The whole building pulsed like a living thing, chaotic, loud, yet strangely controlled. For the people who worked here, this was nothing new. It was just another Monday morning, another busy start to another long week. And then, everything changed. The automatic glass doors at the ER entrance slid open with their usual quiet hiss. At first, no one noticed. A few people glanced up and looked away. But then, from somewhere near the front desk, a sharp gasp cut through the noise. Heads turned. Through the doorway stepped a German shepherd, tall, lean, and moving with deliberate purpose. His fur was tangled, dusted with mud, and streaked with something darker. Blood. No collar, no human in sight, but his steady, determined stride made it instantly clear. This was not some lost stray. This dog was here for a reason. And then the reason became horrifyingly clear. Across his back, held in place by what looked like torn strips of fabric and rope, was a young girl. Limp, unconscious. Her arms dangled lifelessly at her sides. Her face was pale under the harsh hospital lights, hair matted with dirt and dried blood. The ER lobby fell into a silence so complete it felt unreal. A receptionist froze mid-sentence, pen hovering above paper. A doctor's words trailed off, his eyes fixed on the impossible sight in front of him. The dog, later they would know his name was Max, walked forward, each nail clicking softly against the tile. His gaze was focused, intense, not panicked, not wild, but full of urgency and something almost human in its plea. For several long seconds, no one moved. It felt like the hospital had slipped into a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Whispers rippled. How did he get in? Where did he come from? But then, like a cold wind sweeping through the room, the truth hit them all at once. This dog hadn't wandered in. He had brought her here, and whatever had happened before this moment, it had been bad. Very bad. No one could quite believe what they were seeing. The mud-stained dog, bleeding in places himself, standing like a statue in the middle of the ER, with the little girl still secured to his back. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but he didn't falter, didn't collapse. He was waiting. It was Nurse Lena Morris who finally moved. Only 28 years old, she had seen her share of pediatric trauma, but nothing like this. Her eyes flicked from the girl's still face to the unwavering gaze of the dog. Slowly, carefully, she took a step forward. Max lowered his head and let out a low, guttural sound. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. His muscles tensed, not in aggression, but in fear. Fear for her. Even now, in this strange place, he was guarding her. Lena froze. Instinct told her to stop, but training, and something deeper, told her to trust. She knelt down, speaking in a low, steady voice. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here to help, I promise." Max's ears twitched. His tail moved the slightest bit. His eyes searched her face for something, then, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back. Just enough. That was all Lena needed. With careful hands, she lifted the girl from his back. The child was frighteningly light, her skin cool and clammy, her breaths shallow. Lena cradled her tightly and turned toward the trauma bay. "We've got a pediatric emergency!" she shouted. "Prep room 3, now!" In an instant, the room came alive. Stretchers rattled into motion. Emergency kits snapped open. The code blue alarm blared. Doctors and nurses moved like a tide, precise, fast, focused. And in the middle of it all, Max stood still. He didn't try to run. He didn't bark. He simply watched her disappear through the trauma room doors. Inside room 3, the air was thick with urgency. Dr. Patel, the lead ER physician, burst through as Lena gently laid the girl onto the gurney. Monitors came to life, their beeps urgent but steady. Oxygen hissed softly. Gloved hands moved quickly, electrodes on her chest, IV lines in her arms. "She's hypothermic," someone called. Heart rate unstable, another voice added. BP's dropping. Dr. Patel's voice cut through it all. Oxygen, 15 liters. Warm her up now. But behind the noise, there was a heavier silence, the kind that came with the unspoken question, who is she? There was no ID, no backpack, no name. In the system, she became Jane Doe, a nameless child brought in from the brink of death by a dog with no collar. Just outside the trauma bay doors, Max paced, nails tapping an anxious rhythm on the tile. Every time the door opened, he tried to follow, only to be gently blocked by security. He didn't fight. He didn't growl. He just waited. A young nurse, watching his quiet desperation, finally murmured to security, "Let him in. He's not leaving without her." A brief pause. Then the doors opened. Max walked through without hesitation, head low, tail still. He went straight to the gurney and sat beside it. The doctors and nurses worked around him without protest. Somehow, everyone understood. He belonged here. From that moment on, no one doubted it. Max wasn't just some dog. He was hers, and he wasn't going anywhere. Outside the trauma bay, a quiet crowd began to gather. Nurses on break, techs between, rounds, even a few security guards, all standing near the glass, drawn by the strange, powerful sight. They spoke in hushed voices, almost like they were in a church. No one here had ever seen anything like it before. Inside, Max stayed rooted to the same spot by the gurney. His amber eyes never left the girl. The beeping machines, the bright overhead lights, the quick, practiced movements of the medical staff. None of it startled him. It was as though he understood that every hand in that room was trying to save her. Nurse Lena stepped out briefly, holding something in her hand, a worn leather collar. She turned it over, inspecting every inch. The leather was cracked, weathered, and softened with age. No ID tag, no nameplate, no engraving of any kind. "Did we scan him for a chip?" she asked. A nearby tech nodded. "Already tried. Nothing. No chip, no registration." Lena's brow furrowed. "He didn't just show up here by accident. He brought her here on purpose." Down the hall, hospital security had pulled up the surveillance footage from earlier that morning. Grainy images showed Max emerging from the dense tree line behind the hospital. His body was low to the ground, but steady, carrying the girl like a soldier on a mission. He paused only for the automatic doors to open, then walked straight, inside without hesitation. One of the guards muttered under his breath, "That's not a stray." Back in Trauma Room 3, Dr. Patel made a few quick adjustments to the oxygen flow. His eyes flicked to Max, then back to the monitor. "She's stabilizing," he said quietly. "Still critical, but she's fighting." At that, Max exhaled. Just a small, quiet sound, but enough for those nearby to notice. His ears shifted slightly, almost as though he had understood every word. He had done his part. Now, he was waiting for her to wake up. By early afternoon, Detective Ben Carter arrived. Calm, methodical, and sharp-eyed, Carter had a reputation for following his instincts. He stood in the security office, arms folded, watching the footage. His eyes narrowed slightly as Max appeared from the woods with the girl strapped to his back. "He came from the forest," Carter murmured. "That's county land. Nothing but trees and trails for miles." Though he tried not to get attached to animals during an active case, something about this dog got under his skin. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made him think. "This isn't random," Carter said finally, turning toward the window where the tree line loomed in the distance. "He brought her here for a reason." By 3 o'clock, a search team was assembled. Local law enforcement, a K-9 unit, and Ranger Miles Cooper, a seasoned tracker with more than 20 years spent patrolling the thick woodlands surrounding the city. In the ER, Max was still beside the girl when the search team gathered by the doors. When he saw them, he let out a low growl, Not hostile, but sharp, like he was paying attention. Ranger Cooper crouched beside him. "You know the way back, don't you, boy?" Max didn't need a leash. He simply stood, walked to the door, and turned once to look back at them, an unspoken order to follow. The team trailed him across the parking lot, over a drainage ditch, and into the deep, tangled forest. The ground grew rough quickly, mud sucking at boots, roots clawing up from the earth. Fallen branches snapped underfoot. Max moved with care but never paused, weaving through the undergrowth like he had traveled this route before. After nearly an hour, he stopped. They had reached a hidden place, a makeshift camp beneath a thick canopy of leaves and fallen branches. A torn tarp hung low, scorched firewood lay cold in a circle of stones, and scattered food wrappers littered the ground.